In this video I'm going to be telling you about visual processing in the inferior temporal cortex. Just to recap, we have retina to the lateral genetic nucleus to V1, then V1 dorsal stream and the ventral stream, and in the ventral stream V1 goes to V4, which processes colour and shape, and V4 then goes to the inferior temporal cortex. Let's just draw that on a quick map of the brain. Once again, my very simple version of brain structure: boxing glove shape, cerebellum, hindbrain and spinal cord. V1 is here, V4 is here, and the inferior temporal cortex is this area down here. So it goes V1 to V4, and then the next step it goes to is an area called TEO, and then to TE. First interesting thing to note about the inferior temporal cortex is that it has a columnar organization. Very much like V1. What do I mean by that? So imagine that you're looking now onto the surface of IT. You can actually find these columns just like in V1, but in this case they respond as you go down. You find that they respond to certain shapes which are quite similar to each other as you go down in a column. So in this column here, for example, you're seeing triangle type shapes. Next to it you might find responding to slightly different types of shapes next to that one, and then similarly again you might find this one hand-like shapes, and they're all related as you progress down them. So this is what we mean by that columnar organization. And again, similarly, when you go in this direction, you find that the shapes are in some way related, very much like we find the orientation columns moving as we go from column to column. We find there's a relatedness of the shapes as you move across the inferior temporal cortex. There are also, this organization has within it like a substructure. So for example, you'll see what I mean when I give you an example. So as you're going from the lateral to medial, so that means going in this direction here underneath the temporal cortex. The responses tend to move from inanimate to animate stimuli. So for example, on the side here, you might get responses to, I don't know, solid shapes of various kinds. Whereas if you start to look maybe more laterally, so more medially, I should say, you might get responses to more animate type stimuli. Not quite sure what that is, but I think you get the idea. We also have on top of this, you also have some quite specialized areas such as the fusiform face area and the fusiform building area, which appear to respond to these specific stimuli. So for example, in the fusiform face area, if you present them with something that looks a bit like a human face, you get a strong response when you show them the face. But if you jumble it all up, so you end up just moving these various parts around, which I can sort of do with this drawing. So the same stimulus now, but all jumbled up, you get a much weaker response. So the evidence that it's specifically faces rather than the components of faces is debated. And similarly with the fusiform building area. You also have areas which are specific for places versus objects. And this is particularly in an area called the parahippocampal place area. So again, these cells respond to a particular place independently of how that place is viewed. So this, you can get the picture here. What's happening is that as you move more along this axis, you're getting more and more specialization and a higher level of abstraction. And it's kind of fun to imagine that what's happening is you're seeing, in some places, you're seeing, just contrast that then is built up to colours and shapes, and that then is eventually built up as you go along to objects, and then at a higher level faces, buildings, and so on. So that then is our potted diagram of visual processing in the inferior temporal cortex.